Hey, it's Katie, and welcome back to my booktube channel. Today I will be doing my June wrap-up for you guys, and this might be a long one because throughout June I read 17 books, and this was the most amount of pages I've read so far this year in a month. I read like 6,600 pages, so it was definitely a lot, but I think the main reason I read a lot this month is because I was doing this challenge in a group on Goodreads, and it was for Pride Month, and I was able to read a good amount of books for Pride Month, and also a bunch of books that have been on my TBR for a while, so I was really motivated to read this month, and I actually even took some time off because I went on vacation, and I still read a lot, so we will see how long this takes, but let's just jump into it. The first book I read in June was Witches Steeped in Gold by Sienna Smart, and I actually have two copies of this book, the Owl Crate and the Fairy Loot edition. This is the Fairy Loot edition, which I'm obsessed with, but this is basically a Jamaican-inspired fantasy, and it involves like witches and magic and all of this world building. And basically it's these two females who typically are enemies, but they have a common enemy that they have to work together to defeat. So that's really all I knew going into this book, but this was one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and that's probably how I ended up with two copies of it. And I honestly have like mixed feelings about it. I was actually a little disappointed by this book only because the world building, there's a ton of world building, which is great, but the way it was done was kind of confusing. First of all, the writing itself was beautiful, but it used a lot of big words that I feel like I needed a dictionary to understand. But even like aside from that, the world building, there were a lot of words and things unique to the world that was being built that were never really explained, and you were just kind of expected to understand them, and I found myself being really confused. And also our two perspectives, since we have two female main characters, they kind of sounded the same to me, and because it switched off every other chapter, I had to keep looking back to see whose perspective I was reading, which usually isn't a good sign. So I think that the world building was really great, but other than that, this probably won't be one that I would reread, and I'm not really sure if I would continue this series. After that, I decided to go for something that was a little bit lighter, and that was Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman. And it has been a while since I read the first volume, but I was really excited to pick this one up. I literally read it in maybe 20 minutes. I was flying through it. It's so cute and so sweet, and I'm sure you all have heard of this series, but if you haven't read it yet, you totally should. I cannot wait to continue and read Volume 3. Next up, we have Head Over Heels by Hannah Orenstein, and this is a gymnastics romance. We have our main character who was on the Olympic team, or about to be on the Olympic team, but she had this disastrous performance that ended her career, and she just recently broke up with her like all-star football boyfriend. And so she is moving back to her hometown, and while she's there, there is another gymnastics coach who asks for her help to help coach this promising young gymnast who's also hoping to go to the Olympics. Before you get into this book, there is a trigger warning or a content warning for things involving the Me Too movement and everything that went along with that. So please look into those warnings if that's something that you are worried about. But I really loved being back in the gymnastics world. I did gymnastics when I was younger for a few years, and ever since then I've always had a soft spot for the sport. And since this is also involving things that have to do with the Olympics, and the Olympics are happening this year, it was just the perfect time to read this one, and it made me so much more excited to watch Simone Biles and all of those gymnasts compete this year. But I loved all the gymnastics elements. I don't know too much about this sport anymore, so I'm not sure if all the terminology was accurate, but it seemed really accurate to me, so that's definitely a plus, and I did enjoy the writing, and also the romance was pretty enjoyable. I think personally it fizzled out a little bit toward the end for me, but I still definitely think this is a fun one to read if gymnastics is something that interests you. I read my very first Tessa Bailey book last month, so I decided to pick up another one of hers, and that one was Fix Her Up. So Fix Her Up follows Georgie, who basically plans all of these kids' birthday parties and kind of works as a clown because she loves making people laugh, but everybody in her life kind of treats her as this little kid, and she's determined to be seen as an adult finally because that's what she is, and she wants people to realize that she is more mature than they give her credit for. And on the other hand, we have Travis, who is this ex-baseball star. He got injured and he's not really sure what to do with his life after that because that was his dream, and there is this job opportunity, but he's basically seen as this player and this ladies' man, and in order to get this job, he needs to be seen as family friendly. So Georgie and Travis kind of spark this deal to pretend to date, and it would definitely benefit both of them. I also should definitely mention that Georgie is Travis's best friend's little sister, so if that's a trope you're interested in, I definitely would recommend this book to you guys. I really enjoy Tessa Bailey's writing. I love the romance and there's always great banter, but there's definitely moments that are a little bit cringy, so definitely be warned about that before you start it. But they're kind of like guilty pleasure reads to me. I don't know why, but they always just kind of make me happy. I also really enjoyed the baseball references. I've been trying really hard to find more books that involve sports and all of that because I really love watching sports, so I think it'd be fun to find more books that involve like soccer, gymnastics, baseball, anything I really enjoy. So I love that this also had a good amount of baseball references. Then I listened to the audiobook of The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta, and I have been wanting to read this book for a long time, and I'm glad that I finally did. I feel like Pride Month was the perfect time for me to read this, and I think this is a very meaningful read. It follows Michael, who is a mixed-race gay teen in London, and you basically get to see his whole life from when he was younger to him being more grown now, and you get to watch his coming out story, and you just get to see him try to figure out who he is and where he belongs. Although I didn't personally connect to Michael, I think this is such an important read. It's educational and meaningful and inspirational, and it really sparks some like important commentary on sexual identity and all of those kinds of things, also race, and it's just definitely educational, and it 100% deserves this award on the cover. I have already done a full review on this next book, so I will link that below and keep this part short, but the next book I read was Sweet and Bitter Magic by Adrienne Tooley, and I was so excited to read this one, and it did not disappoint. So we have two female main characters, and this is also a sapphic romance, but on one hand, we have Tamsin, who is the most powerful witch of her generation, but she commits the worst magical sin, and she's exiled from her coven and cursed with the inability to love. On the other hand, we have Ren, who is a source, which is a rare kind of person who is literally made of magic. The only thing is she cannot access this magic for herself. Sources are required to train with the coven as soon as they discover their abilities, but Ren is the only caretaker to her ailing father, and so she's basically hiding and just doing whatever she can to make sure she can take care of him. When a magical plague ravages the queendom, Ren's father falls victim, and in order to save him, Ren proposes a bargain. If Tamsin will help her catch the dark witch responsible for the plague, then Ren will give Tamsin her love for her father. Even though I've already read this book, explaining it again to you guys just really makes me want to reread it. I really enjoyed this. The characters were great. I loved the magical element, and the world building was amazing, and I go way more in depth in my review, which again will be linked below if you guys want to check out more of my thoughts. My next read was Would Like to Meet by Rachel Winters. So this is a rom-com, and we have Evie, who works for a film agency, and her job is to get their biggest client, Ezra, to finish his screenwriting. And Ezra will not finish writing his script until Evie basically acts out all of these meet cutes because he doesn't believe in love and he really doesn't want to write a rom-com, but if Evie can prove that it works, then he will write the script. And Evie needs him to write the script or else she will lose her job. I don't know if I really explained that well, but this is definitely the epitome of a rom-com. It's very heartfelt and adorable, but there's also a good amount of awkwardness. So be prepared for that, because I'm somebody that gets secondhand embarrassment, and that definitely did have a factor in this book, but I still think it was worth it. After that, I finally picked up Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I feel like I've had this book for so long, and I'm so glad I finally read it. I actually listened to the audiobook while I followed along with the physical copy, and I really enjoyed reading it that way because it was so much better to hear Elizabeth Acevedo tell her own story. And also I enjoyed following along just because I think the format of it is really cool, because this is a story told in verse, and Elizabeth Acevedo is a slam poet, so it was really cool to hear her explain her story. Camino's father visits her in the Dominican Republic every summer, but this year, on the day he was supposed to arrive, Camino goes to the airport and sees a crowd of people crying. In New York City, Yahaira is called to the principal's office, where her mother tells her that her father has died in a plane crash. Separated by distance, the two girls are forced to live in a new reality where their father is dead, but then they learn of each other. Poppy's death uncovers all of these painful truths that he's kept hidden, and the girls also have to grapple with what it means to have a sister that they didn't even know existed. This book is heartbreakingly beautiful. It is so powerful, and it's filled with so many emotions. There is obviously a ton of grief, but there's also a lot of love, and it definitely moved me. After that, I moved on to another heartbreaking story, which was Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and you guys have probably heard about this, so I'm not going to dive too deep into it, because I also did a reading vlog, which I will also have linked below for you guys, so you can watch my reading experience and hear more of my thoughts. But I'm so glad I finally picked this up, and definitely a 5-star read. For those of you that don't know, this is a Greek mythology retelling that's obviously following Achilles and Patroclus, and it's definitely worth it. I didn't really know too much going into it, other than the fact that this makes a lot of people cry, and it's a lot of people's favorite books. So I feel like that's really all you need to know as well. I love mythology. I loved this story, and there definitely were some moments that caught me off guard and made me really emotional. So go ahead and check out that vlog if you'd like to hear more. After that, we have You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria. So basically, we have two main characters who are actors, and they are working on this new TV show together that means a lot to both of them for very different reasons. And the day that they meet to start practicing, they get off on the wrong foot, and both of them thinks that the other one kind of hates them, and they are basically love interests in this show, so they have to spend a lot of time together filming, and you get to see a lot of that blurred line between like what is actually their relationship in real life and their relationship on screen. And it also includes a lot of parts of the show in the book, if that makes sense. So you get to see a lot of the scenes that would be in the show that they are acting for, and I thought that was really cool. And obviously there are some great Latin romance vibes in here, which I was really, really enjoying, and this cover is stunning. I feel like before I read this, I always used to see this book in Target, and that's kind of the main reason I picked this one up at the library. If I'm being honest though, I enjoyed the romance, but it definitely wasn't one of my favorites, and I was a little bit disappointed in that. So if you think this is for you, I think it's still a good book to read. It's just probably not one I would reread. After that, I actually read an ARC that I got from NetGalley, and that was for Endless Skies by Shannon Price, which comes out August 17th. And it was an ebook ARC, so I don't have it with me, and I think I'm going to struggle through this synopsis, but hopefully it's good enough for you guys to understand what this book's about. So basically, this book takes place in a world that is on this floating island, and it's kind of hidden from humans. So it's kind of like the secret island. If you've ever seen Wonder Woman, it kind of reminded me of that. And basically, there are these creatures who are trained to be warriors of some sort, and I cannot pronounce the word. I think it's like I'm not sure. It's one of those words in fantasies that I pronounced a bunch of times in my head, but I don't really know how to say it. But basically, they are able to transform into creatures with wings. I kind of pictured them as like lions with wings. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's how I pictured them. And basically, on this island, all of a sudden, some of their kids start getting really, really sick, and that doesn't ever really happen, and so they're not sure how to fix it, and all of a sudden, the prince ends up getting sick as well, and so they send all their warriors into the human world to try to track down a cure, because they asked the humans for help, and they said no, and so all of these warriors end up going, and it's really dangerous, and they're going on this mission, but our main character, she hasn't become a warrior yet. She was a day or two away from her ceremony before this happened, but since she was not officially a warrior, she was not able to go on this mission, and while she's left behind, she learns of these secrets that could really change their mission for the worst, and so she decides that she needs to either try to help them, or she's not sure if she should stay behind and do what she was told to do, and it's definitely a battle within herself. And we also get two other perspectives in this book. We get her best friend and potential love interest, and then we also get her sister. So you get a couple different perspectives on this situation, and I thought that was really interesting, and I think the plot is definitely really interesting and very intense. Like I said, I think the plot was really intriguing, really intense, and had a decent amount of action scenes. So if that sounds like something you would like, I definitely think you should give this one a chance. I really did enjoy the writing, but there were also some things that I didn't enjoy too much. I really felt that it was kind of rushed, and also I felt that one of the perspectives that we got, I don't think it was really necessary. At least I didn't really enjoy those scenes too much. It was our main character's sister. I didn't really enjoy her scenes too much. And also there was a love triangle, and I usually like love triangles, but I don't think this one was done too well. So personally, those are things that just didn't quite work for me. But again, the plot was really interesting, and I was invested in that part of the story. So you just kind of have to see if this would be for you. After that, I moved on to something a little bit happier and lighter, and that was I Think I Love You by Ariane December. I read this one while I was on vacation, and I think it's the perfect vacation read because it's a rom-com, it's a sapphic romance, you get a little bit of some light enemies to lovers, and it's definitely very cute, and also involves things about a film festival. So if you love books that involve unique hobbies, I think this would be the perfect one for that. So like I said, this was a cute LGBTQ plus rom-com, and it focused a lot on friendships being tested, self-discovery, and also a film festival. So I think that's the perfect scenario for a really adorable romance contemporary. There's honestly a lot more tension and drama in here than I was expecting. I thought this was going to be a super fluffy read, and it definitely still had some of those vibes, but there's a lot more tension between some of the characters than I was expecting, which definitely made this more of a dynamic read than I thought. And I also really loved both of our main characters because we get both of their perspectives, and sometimes when we have two main characters that are the same gender, I get their perspectives kind of mixed up, sort of like what I was saying with Witches Steeped in Gold, but that was not the case in this one. I could definitely tell who was who, and I never had to check which perspective I was reading. I feel like I finished June off really strong because the next few reads were some of my favorites of the whole month, and the first one in that group was Tokyo Ever After by Amiko Jean. And I also did a full review of this book as well, so I will also have that linked somewhere for you guys to check out. And this is such a cute contemporary. I was really looking forward to this book before it was released, and I was not disappointed. So basically, our main character, Azumi, has grown up with just her and her mom, and she never really knew who her father was, but one day, her and her best friend find this hint as to who her father is, and so they reach out, and it turns out that her dad is actually the crown prince of Japan, and she is a literal princess. And so basically overnight, she gets swept up in all of this and sent to Japan to meet her father and to learn how to be a princess, and she has to learn all of the different customs and traditions that happen in Japan, and it's definitely a whirlwind for her. And she also gets paired up with this bodyguard who is like very brooding but also seems to kind of be her soulmate. So there is a lot going on, but it's all super cute and heartfelt and also very meaningful because she also deals with a lot of things. She deals with the media portraying her in a certain way, and you get to see how that affects different people. And also, when she was in America, because she is an Asian American, she never felt American enough, and now that she is in Japan, she doesn't feel like she is Japanese enough. So she also is kind of having an identity crisis, and she's not really sure where she belongs. I loved that this book is literally steeped in Japanese culture. It was so fun to get to know these customs and traditions right along with Izumi, and it just makes you want to travel there so much more. I also think this was such a fun take on a princess story. It kind of reminded me of Princess Diaries, where you're taking this girl who is not like the definition of princess. She's not really princess material, and you're kind of trying to teach her all the customs and make her understand all of these different things. And she's like quirky and fun, and she definitely brings a different element to the royal family than what typically happens. Also, this book is kind of like enemies to friends to lovers, and I really loved the progression of that. So I highly recommend this book. This was one of my favorites that I read this month, and I really think you guys should pick this one up. I was so excited to find this next one in a bookstore in June, and so I had to read it right away, and that was The Deal by Elle Kennedy. I have been hearing amazing things about this book, especially from Steph. I have mentioned her before, and I will hopefully link her channel below. I feel like I give her and I give Haley in Bookland a ton of promo because they are my favorite booktubers. But she always says amazing things about this entire series, and I went to Barnes & Noble a few weeks ago and ended up finding this, and I never thought I would find it at a bookstore, so I ended up getting this one and the sequel, and I am so glad that I did. I really enjoyed this book. So basically all you need to know is that this is a hockey romance, and basically the hockey player in here is like the bad boy, and he needs to be tutored because he did not do too well on this test, and he needs good grades in order to play hockey. So he asks our main character, Hannah, I forgot her name for a second, but he asked her to tutor him, and I can't remember. Oh, she has a crush on this other guy, and so part of their deal is that she will tutor him and he will pretend to be with Hannah in order to get this other guy's attention. So it's kind of a whole bunch of different tropes that I usually love, and it reminded me of a Wattpad book in the best way possible. I love reading Wattpad. If I'm not reading one of my physical books, I'm usually reading Wattpad, and it's like one of my favorite ways to pass the time. So I loved that it was giving me those vibes, and you have like the bad boy, good girl vibes. You have like the tutor vibes, and also you get hockey. And again, I'm really loving books with sport elements to them, and this one was no different. Oh, also, please make sure you check the trigger warnings for this book before reading. And then the book that I read after The Deal was another one of my favorites from the entire month, and that was Blade of Secrets by Trisha Levenseller, which I'm sure is no surprise to you guys because I am new to Trisha Levenseller's writing. I just started reading her books in 2021, but this is my third one I've read, and I have loved every single one of them. I have also filmed a full book review for this book, but I don't think it's out yet. It should be coming out within the next week or two, so stay tuned for that, but I'm very excited for you guys to hear more of my thoughts. But basically, this book follows Ziva, who prefers metal over people, and she spends all day in her forge where she can basically avoid society and all the anxiety that it gives her. She is able to use her magical ability to create all of these weapons that are filled with power. And one day, she is commissioned to create a weapon for the warlord. And the result of this commission is a sword capable of stealing its victim's secrets. But then Ziva learns of the warlord's plan to use this sword to enslave all the world, and so Ziva takes the sword and her sister and they flee. And also on this journey, they have a mercenary and a scholar with them, and I loved this group of characters. I feel like Trisha Levenseller writes the best heroines and also just really great characters in general. There's always great banter and a good romance, and there's great action and intensity, and I always feel so many emotions when I read her books, and I was so excited I felt the same way about this one because this was one of my most anticipated releases, and obviously it did not disappoint. I also really loved the representation of a character with anxiety. I think that was really well done, and I'm glad it played a pretty big part in the book. So if you're looking for a book with representation like that, this is the book for you. This next book is one that I've been wanting to read for a very long time, and I'm so glad that I finally picked it up, and that is Among the Beasts and Briars by Ashley Poston. This was the book that I got in my very first Owl Crate box, and I don't know why I didn't read it until now, but I am so glad I finally decided to pick it up because I really enjoyed this. This is a super whimsical read, but also kind of has really dark vibes in it. And you also have like an animal companion, and it's just everything I love about fantasies. So our main character, Karis, lives in this kingdom where it is surrounded by these dark woods that are cursed and forbidden, and nobody ever really can escape or survive these woods. And Karis knows that better than anybody because she ended up going in there with her friends and her mother, who ended up being killed, and she was touched by the curse, but somehow she was able to survive. And ever since then, she carries a little bit of that curse in her blood as magic. As a new queen is being crowned, the woods end up trying to take over the kingdom, and this forces Karis and her friend, who is a fox, to flee. It is now up to her to find and beg the Lady of the Wilds to help save her home. This was definitely whimsical and haunting, and I also think this would be a pretty good book for younger YA readers as well, because there wasn't like super intense scenes or any like graphic romance scenes or anything like that. I think this would be great if you're a younger YA reader, but also if you love intensity and all those things, there's also a decent amount of that. So I think this is good for readers of any age, honestly. And this is probably my favorite book that includes a quest. I feel like usually I tend to stay away from books that are just focusing on a quest because it's not really my favorite trope, but this book does it so well. There was great world building, and I loved the animal companions, and just overall I loved Karis and Fox, and this read made me really happy. Another new release that I read was May the Best Man Win by Z.R. Eller, and this was another book that I also read for Pride Month because it has a trans main character, and I haven't read a lot of books with transgender main characters. This might honestly be my first one, which I feel like is super sad. I definitely want to read more books with transgender main characters. I really enjoyed seeing that representation in this book. I didn't really enjoy the plot of this book too much because they're basically competing to be homecoming king at this homecoming dance, so that doesn't really interest me too much, but I flew through this story. I was very invested in our characters, especially our main character who was transgender, and you get to see so much involving him and what he is going through, and he goes through so much, which is horrible to think about. There's just so much transphobia in this, and well, I guess not so much, but specifically from one character, and it was horrific to read, and there was use of his dead name and so many things that went on that just hurt my heart, and it sucks that people go through those things because it just made me so sad. But even with all that, there were also other characters who were very supportive and who did the right thing, and it's definitely a very meaningful and educational read, so I definitely recommend you read this. And finally, we are on the last book I read in June, which was Spell's Trouble by PC and Kristen Cast. And I'm just going to be honest and say that I did not end this month on a good note because I really did not like this book. And I feel horrible saying that. I don't like saying bad things about books, but I had such high hopes for this. This was another one of my most anticipated releases. I ended up buying this book even a few days before it was supposed to be out because I saw it at the bookstore and I knew it was a few days ahead of the release date. And so I was so excited I got it early. And I was just disappointed, and I go more in depth about that in my Goodreads review, which my Goodreads account is linked below if you would like to check that out, but I don't want to trash this book. I think it just was not for me. So this story follows Hunter and Mercy, who are twin witches and direct descendants of the founder of their hometown, Goodville, and they are basically gatekeepers for like the gates to all of these other realms and kind of like the gates to hell, if that makes sense. And then their mother is the first victim in this string of murders, and so the twins vow to avenge her death. But it will take more than magic to rein in these ancient mythological creatures that are wreaking havoc on their town. I honestly didn't enjoy the writing too much or the dialogue between the characters. It felt, I don't want to say childish. I don't really know how to describe it. It didn't quite work for me. It was a little bit immature, and I feel like a lot of the dialogue wasn't necessary. It felt like they were kind of dumbing things down for me, which I didn't enjoy. It kind of felt like it was written for younger readers, which also didn't really make sense because there were some sexual innuendos and also like a sexual encounter between two of the 16-year-olds, which I honestly felt really weird reading about. So be warned about that before you pick this one up. It's not like super graphic or anything, at least I don't think it was. I just kind of felt really uncomfortable. I also was so excited for the magic in this book because I love witchy reads. Anything with magic in it I'm obsessed with because I feel like there's so many different kinds of things you can do with magic, but unfortunately I was also disappointed with that in this case because it was honestly kind of basic and also kind of dumbed down, which I feel horrible saying, but the one example I can think of is when they were trying to make it rain and their spell was literally chanting "make it rain" 3 times. And I feel like you could probably be a little bit more creative with that. So it just kind of made me laugh and I was definitely disappointed. I'm just going to stop it there because I feel like I could probably go on a rant about this book, but I really don't want to rip into this book. I'm sure a good amount of people enjoyed it, but this was probably my most disappointing read of the year so far. Alright, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you for sticking it out. I know this was very long, but I read a ton of books in June, and I really hope you guys found some new books to read. I love talking about these with you guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And if you do subscribe, click the notification bell so you know when I upload next. Thank you guys so much for watching. I can't wait to see you in my next video.